Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Architecture of Change. I'm your host, Leanne Mair, and welcome to Series 2. And Series 2 is still very much in the same vein of deconstructing systems and designing solutions. But this season, especially because of where we are in the year, it's a time to be, I think all of us, whether you follow an academic year program, whether you follow a calendar year program, we're all at that same point, that point of reflection. And this season is about designing things differently, the architecture of success. And the reason why I really wanted to talk about this is because, well, it's twofold, right? Number one, we're heading into January where everybody's going to be bombarding you with new you, better you, 125% improved you. This is what you should be doing. These are the goals that you need to make. And it feels at a complete juxtaposition to being told that we need to be mindful. We need to take our time. We need to do all of these things. And I think this is the modern paradox of success, which is, and I'll talk about this in a later episode, which is I don't believe, and I think I might have said this last week even, I don't believe in a work-life balance. I don't. I believe in a work-life integration. And that is a significantly different take and view. Because if we look at our working weeks, whether you work 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, 15 hours, 25 hours, whatever it might be, one thing I know for sure is that when we talk about work, whether we want to, whether we want to admit this or not, we are 24/7 focused on work. Yes, we might find moments, pockets where we stop, pockets where we decide to, let me take this moment for myself. But most of the time, it's bound up in us thinking about work, especially when we're not having a good time. And then when you think about success, it's this part of what we see. And it doesn't matter whether we're like myself, a geriatric millennial, or, you're Gen Z or whatever. We still see the contradictory messaging, the curation of entrepreneurship online, or this kind of life that you have where you find the time to always relax and there's enough time to do it, which also isn't really a reality, because a lot of the times what we're being sold in terms of the relaxation time is a almost, I'm going to say, an illusion as to how things really work. And by that I mean, I'd like to believe that, there's a finite level of I can switch off after doing a 9 to 5. But most of the time you still can't. I'd like to believe that success in an ideal world comes with moderation, but I also don't believe that. Success does come with obsession. And I think this is sometimes the difficulty, is that the packaging and the presentation of this makes it very difficult. And as I was talking about in last week's episode around the movement or the evolution of modern leadership, it's that same segue of success. How do we present, and success is of course different for everybody, but how do we present a realistic version of success that shows that what we need to do is make sacrifices? What we need to do is design and create a life that allows space for those different sacrifices. And it's something that I've practiced, and I didn't even realize it at the beginning. I mean, at the beginning, when I started to actively think about how I approached not only my personal life, but how did I approach working with my advisory clients? How did I approach working with my coaching clients? It all came back to this concept of work-life integration. Without being able to optimize our work life, we cannot optimize our personal life. So, in many senses, our success is not just bound to what we do, our success is also bound to how we live and who we are. And in many cases, we still do not make those same allowances for that. I'm going to call it for that space of who we are, how we live, and how do we bridge the gap? How do we, I should have said close the gap. That actually would have been a lot cleverer. How do we kind of close that gap in terms of not allowing ourselves to feel guilty? Because I think especially for women, we see that change of, when we look back, success was outsourcing everything, giving up everything, not having a life. Then we went into the so-called lazy girl era of, I don't really want to work that hard. When I say work that hard, I don't want responsibility. I just want to go in and go out. But what that's given birth to is a larger space of performance without purpose. I deliver, but it doesn't make me feel any better. And it's not that everything has to be aligned with a higher purpose, because I think that's another one of those trappings of modern success, is that everyone's like, look, because this was my purpose, I just followed my dream, I followed my purpose, and then the money came and all of this kind of stuff happened. I'm happy for all of those people. I'm very, very happy for all of those people, but that is not a reflection of the journey that most people indeed have. And sometimes the purpose doesn't have to be this big, massive, life-changing thing. But to get more out, or to feel, and when I say feel successful, because this is a conversation I have with friends all the time, like, I'm like, I don't feel successful. I don't know what that should feel like, because the other tragedy around the strictures or of the definitions of modern success is that we are so used to accomplishing our goals, we forget to celebrate them. And I'm going to say that again. We become so used to accomplishing our goals, we forget to celebrate them. Because part of this modern success paradox is the continuation of striving. It's never, and I know never, Judge Judy used to say that never and always are exaggerations. So I'm going to say it is rarely about enjoying those moments of achievement. It's always about getting to the next point. And as we continue to get to all those next points, we forget to go, oh, wait a second. Stop, take a minute, take a moment and breathe. And this becomes the challenge. This becomes the difficulty in navigating how we feel, because we're constantly pushing ourselves to achieve and strive for the next thing in order to feel successful, as opposed to laterally looking around and saying, this is what I've achieved in life. This is what I've achieved on a personal basis. And all of those things are things that I have never taken the time to really appreciate. But all of those things are also, if I'd really sat down and taken a catalogue of all of the things that I set out to achieve, I actually have it. And therein sometimes lies the danger, is that we're so focused on this feeling of success, achievement, striving, more, that sometimes we forget that we have all of the things that we would have liked to have, all of the things that we dreamed of and more. But where we're struggling is to find the emotions, the words, the articulation around how do I process and enjoy it. And I think that is a space for an evolution, as it were, into defining a new type of success. Because when I think about, I still remember sitting in a group of women, and these very, very successful women were talking about all the things that they've achieved personally. And they caveated that and said, we may not be, and by the way, it's not that I think marriage and children are the pinnacle of personal success either, but I'm just using it as an example and reflecting the time and the conversation that was being had. But what they said was, we don't want you to think that we sacrificed having partnerships and children for our career. It just seems as though it worked out that way for us and a lot of women like us. And when I sat back and I thought, and I sat down and I thought about it, and success has always come with sacrifice. And I don't mean just for women. I mean in general, whether it's a father who works 80 hours a week and is absent, or, a partner who works loads of hours and always travels and isn't always there for their partner. It comes with an element of success. An element of sacrifice. And sometimes the success doesn't outweigh the sacrifice. And I think this is why it becomes really important in terms of this theme or this thematic of season 2 or series 2 around the architecture of success and designing that. It's because we have to be aware of where our, I always get this word wrong. I think it's a stopcock or, you know what I'm saying? Like that stop loss point is in different parts of our lives, because I think that the hardest adjustment to make is getting to the place that you want to achieve and being unprepared for it. And when I say unprepared, I mean unprepared from a personal life perspective. I don't know how I show up in this new life, and I don't know how I bring my friends with me. I don't know what that looks like to be the only one to be doing XYZ. I don't know what that looks like. How do I organize my family? But then also on the professional side, like now that I'm here, how do I feel? How do I feel? And how have I anticipated moving into new spaces? Because those changes, and this is one of the things I've been thinking about, is that achieving our goals shifts and moves us into a new space. Whereas instead of being at the top of the class, the one with the most knowledge, we are now ultimately freshers. In fact, as I was thinking about it, it made me think of the university analogy. You go from being a sixth former, you're at the top of the tree at school, then you go to university and you're like, wow, I still feel completely out of my depth. I thought I knew a lot, but I actually don't. And these transitions happen in all parts of our lives, right? When we move from university to our, first jobs, or even if it's not university, wherever you go to, you move into your first job, you think you know a lot, you think you have a lot of experience. And when you get there, you're like, everything's new. And it becomes harder for us to accept this shift. It becomes harder for us to accept this transition because we sometimes chastise ourselves that we should know better. We sometimes chastise ourselves that we're going to know what to do when we get there, when actually, why would we know what to do when we get there? Unless we've thought about what it could be like. Because as they say, you don't know what you don't know. But part of designing and architecting your lifestyle is about not necessarily always being able to preempt your challenges, but being able to have said, I have thought about what my next step could be. I have thought about what kind of challenges may I face, or these are the challenges that I've had, but now that I've got, let's say, people responsibility, what could that look like? Now that I've taken this new challenge on, what does the organization expect of me, and how does that impact my personal life? what is the largest challenge that I see, as in Leanne Mair, working with the women I do, is usually that it's not the job that becomes more difficult. It's the involvement of politics and spending more time having to navigate an organizationally political landscape, and that impact and the emotional heavy lifting of that, and how it impacts home life. Because what do they say? When you complain, we talk about the same topic 5 to 10 times more. So it absorbs you outside of the office. Those are things, those are data points. Even when we did the Experience Chasm survey, surveying Black women across Europe, the same thematics came out. The more senior you get, it's not that the job is necessarily from, content more difficult, more intensive. It's that you spend more time doing political, having to manage people, manage egos, navigate that, which is a very, very different challenge to anything else. But when you're going into those situations, and this is once again the challenge and the paradox of modern success, is that people externally see the rise in your positioning with the organization, but they don't necessarily see the increase, not in load in terms of delegating, but in political load, emotional burden, and what that means, not just for you as an individual within an organization, but what that means for as an individual within your life as a whole. And that for me is the crux of why creating space, because realistically speaking, 24 hours, we can say it's a long time in a day, but it's not really that much time. But this is why creating space and understanding where our stopcocks are, and understanding where we are determined to say, look, I'm happy to sacrifice this much. I'm happy to do this and this and this, because I don't want to sacrifice X, Y, and Z, or I'm happy to go to this point because I can recoup it, readjust it, rebalance it, whatever it might be. That part of the preparation allows us to start to get to this point where we can embrace the success that we sometimes have planned for, and in other times we have been very thankful or whatever to have just landed and stumbled into. And one of the things I always think about is, in general, whether it's being, at the beginning I thought, I used to say you're a 24/7 employee, but you're a 24/7 employee even if you're your own boss. That doesn't change. And we think about our jobs in so many different contexts. That's why intentional work-life integration and being able to navigate this modern success paradox in terms of, how can I feel successful and how can I enjoy that? What does success look like to me? And when I get there, what am I expecting to feel? Because sometimes that's the other point, right? Anticipation of the feeling can be disappointing, or even not knowing what to feel. I still can recall, and I think I said this somewhere else, but if I haven't, I'm going to say it again, which is, a colleague of mine reminded me just before the publication of my first book, Closing the Gap. He reminded me very clearly that the first time only happens once. So enjoy it, embrace it, remember it. And I can still remember on November the 9th, 2023, and I think, in fact, I got my books before then, but I still remember holding the book in my hand and asking myself, what am I meant to feel here? I was excited. I was not just excited, I was elated. I can't say I couldn't believe that I'd done it, but at the same time, it was that mixed feeling. I could believe that I'd done it, but I couldn't believe that I'd done it. And I have to admit, for the first 2 months post-publication, it hadn't settled in. I had achieved a milestone that not every person has achieved, nor will they achieve. And I didn't know how to process it. And I'd prepared for the moment, and I'd had the reminder, and it was because it was the first time. And where I'd got to was on to the next one, and not next book, but on to the next thing, onto the next thing. And it was once again around this time of year, it had been a month and a bit post-release, that I realized I hadn't truly celebrated, taken the time, taken the moments. I'd celebrated parts of it. And people were like, how do you feel? This is a really great thing. But I hadn't fully come to terms with achieving the goal that I wanted to achieve. And on the external side of it, it was, yes, this is so amazing. And I was like, yeah, I am happy. But on the internal side, and in those quiet moments, I was having conversations. I was like, yeah, I still don't know what to do with this feeling. I don't know what to do with it. I should be happy. I am happy. But somehow I have reduced this to something that, yeah, okay, I've done it now. Thanks very much. Tick the box. And this is sometimes what can cause us, this whole situation, and I'm just explaining it. And I'll explain how I took a moment in a second. But this can sometimes this can sometimes be how it is. We achieve it, we kind of half process it, and then we move on, and then it's there, but it's not really something that we actively celebrate. And one of the things I decided to do to kind of embed it, and this this might not apply in your case so directly, but one of the things I asked myself is, what has this process and what has this achievement changed about me? But why did I want to do it? What was the purpose of this? And the purpose of my book was partially to be a love letter to Black women, but it was also to provide organizations with the support structure in very clear frameworks, and also the contexts behind topics, so that they could make change without the excuses, plural, but also to start to self-examine. And I also said to myself, if it only helps one person, then my job here is done. And guess what? I found out that it helped not only one person, but several other people. And it was coming back to my original purpose of writing the book, and knowing that no matter what, that was the reason why I did it, and I achieved it, helped me to reposition that in and of itself was my success. It wasn't it being a bestseller. That wasn't my success. My success was something a lot smaller. It was that I had achieved what I wanted in trying to create change. And I think that for me is when I use the word, I'm not going to use that word. I was going to use the word reduce, but it's the wrong word. The word I'm looking for is distill. When we distill down parts of our motivation for success, it's a really good point of connectivity to help us reestablish why we do what we do, why we wanted to achieve what we wanted to achieve. And that, the distillation process, and reconnecting with the original reason as to why you want to achieve something. And as I said, it doesn't, like, I took my book as an example. But there are different examples in my personal life, which, and in fact, I'll share another one, which is, one of the things that I'm really conscious of being a mother is being able to open the doors to the world to my children, right? So part of the things that I embrace in my own personal success is the fact that I can do and create and have workations. That for me is something, it's a multifaceted part of my success. And I think that's where the modern success barometer has to change. And this is why integration and really thinking about ourselves in the frame of overall purpose and what are the things I'm trying to achieve, not on the massive level all the time, but small yet impactful ways in our lives. Because otherwise, the definitions of success today can have us in a situation where we're striving continuously after the air. Or sometimes we grab onto something tangible, but in doing all of those things, we've forgotten the joy of the journey. We've forgotten the joys of life outside, because the push is always on work success. And we've forgotten to create those moments of real connectivity to ourselves, to our friends, to our family, in pursuit of a feeling that sometimes might be fleeting, or sometimes might not even occur at all once we've achieved what we wanted to achieve. And taking those steps to try and build that, create that. And when I say build and create, it's building and creating that space for success, but also that intentional way of living makes us not only better leaders, aspiring leaders, managers, colleagues, and I've done it in that order on purpose. But it also makes us better humans. It makes us better friends. It makes us better mothers, fathers, daughters, sisters, brothers, aunties, uncles, whatever it might be, because the intentionality and the design is very much thought out. It's very much aligned. And that doesn't mean there aren't going to be moments where life is lifing and you face unexpected challenges. Of course, that's going to happen. There's no question or doubt behind that. But it's being intentional that when I win, I know how to celebrate that win. When I win, it's not just a professional win. It's also a personal win, because I'm actively trying to manage the impacts of that professional win on my personal life. We're always prepared for losses in many ways, not as in professional ones. In many ways, as in, the challenge comes, we find a way to navigate the challenge, but we don't necessarily prepare ourselves in that same way for the wins and the impacts of those, both positively and negatively, on our personal lives and on our professional lives. Because when we do that, it helps to make us, as I said, better people, but it also adds a depth of meaning to our lives as a whole, but it also adds a depth of meaning to how we show up when we are in those positions where we get to influence organizational culture, when we get to influence the paths of other people, and understanding that work-life integration is important. But how do I actually drive that ahead? How do I actually support that? It can only happen if we start with ourselves as the individual. And sometimes deconstructing the system isn't an external one, it's an internal one. And designing solutions, once again, isn't outside, it's very much within the personal household. So thank you for listening as usual. Feel free to check out the other episodes, but I really hope this is giving you food for thought as many of us enter into our reflective phase as the calendar year draws to an end and we start 2025. So I hope you join me next week, and you can catch this either way you're watching it, potentially on live on LinkedIn and or YouTube, or you can listen to the audio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also directly on my website, which is www.leannemair.com. So thank you for your time, and I will see you here once again next week, Friday. So have a great weekend. Bye-bye.